Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, wherever situated. So I work as a senior manager for utilities, as in I look after national level role for multiple plants handling and doing utilities upliftment, um, efficiency improvement projects on energy, electricity, thermal, as well as on water and effluent sides. I have around 25 years of experience, and currently I'm working with Asahi Beverages for last 7 years in this role. Um, I'm also a certified energy manager from Association of Energy Engineers in US. And today I'll be speaking more from a perspective of as a generic certified energy manager and a generic user of energy, and a generic person who deals with utilities rather than more specific to my company. So that my talk will be more generic and more industry related. So not a very fancy presentation. I think I kept Jared on the toes till last moment because I spent less time of presentation but more time on speaking. So maybe so very simple presentation which I'm going to show 4 5 slides with all of you. There could be a mix of variation of people attending this webinar. Maybe there are few people who are quite mature, a few industries or companies which are very mature in their decarbonization roadmap or studying, or the journey. And there could be some people or some companies which are just starting and know to see how we can start. So please bear with me if I sound a bit repetitive. But what I'm trying to show you in today's 7 8 minutes prezo is that how a typical decarbonization roadmap can be laid down by a company. Um, and where I'll be presenting a sample study model, and I'm happy to share it if someone wants it. What we're going to check is how to start this decarbonization roadmap, how to start the journey, how to keep proceeding on that journey, which is very important. Once you start, you have to keep proceeding. So, what are the tactics you need to implement to keep proceeding? And very importantly, how to decide, because when you get into this study or this journey of decarbonization, you'll come to know about many aspects, many multiple decisions to be taken on cost front or on carbon emissions front, on your company's long-term aspirations. A lot of decisions needs to be made. So how to decide, and and again, very importantly, how to keep it live, like as in how to take a buy-in from the higher management, how you can keep a live sections of decarbonizations discussions always happening in and around your business, right? um, all right, so starting with a very preliminary study Gantt chart. I mean, this is a Gantt chart prepared to study your plants. If you have plants, multiple plants, or multiple sites, this is how you start your decarbonization study, which is first and foremost is preliminary study. You do a preliminary study and then you break it up into multiple activities and you create a Gantt chart. Generally speaking, with the multiple sites, you take around 3 to 4 months of time to do a preliminary study and to collect all the data. So it has its own phases from zero to say phase four, right from uh, doing the site visits, taking the data from the sites, going into the discussion modes of what technologies are applicable, and then analyzing those activities and those initiatives in phase three. And then, as I said, phase four is more towards your decision making and showing it to your board members and taking their mind that this is what our overall study looks like. And then we start into getting into more deeper studies and more laser sharp studies. um, this is again a very good study dimension to decarbonization study, and this is what I did previously with some of my companies. Is you create a scenario where you, because we don't know energy's market trending in coming 10 years time, so say from 2025 to 2035, we don't know how the market is going to behave in terms of pricing of electricity as well as gas. It's very dynamic in today's world, especially after COVID. So what I did, I created three scenarios, which is low cost scenario, wherein the cost of utilities or electricity and gas is going down in the future, which we think should go, which we hope. I don't know whether it happens or not. And then a medium case scenario, which is a stable pricing, and a high cost scenario where the cost is increasing. Right? So there are the three scenarios, and every initiative is then measured across these three scenarios so that we know how it behaves under these scenarios. This is a sample MAC, like as in a marginal abatement cost curve, which is an outcome of this study, how you going to create a price as well as your CO2 emissions reduction comparison. So you look at this, you see on this x-axis how much kilotons of CO2 you can emit. Um, you can eliminate from the atmosphere by doing some specific technologies intervention. And if you look at the bottom, you'll see that there is all these three scenarios of low cost, medium cost, and high cost. And anything which is green is showing that it is NPV positive for all the three scenarios. Anything which is red shows that it is negative NPV, and black is something where we have not gauged that activity against that scenario. So couple of scenarios, the basic electric forklifts, the basic heat pumps, medium temperature heat pumps, anaerobic digestion systems, and high temperature heat pumps. And some, if you see the last one is, I can't show that, but it's more a new technology interventions kind of thing. So if you look at a very simple outcome is that electric forklifts are green in all the scenarios. They will give us an NPV positive results, while medium temperatures are good if the cost increases with medium and high cost, while they will not be very good or not be positive in NPV if this is low cost. So similarly, we did analysis for anaerobic digestion, for heat pumps and other technologies which we want to do. So it's generally we know how much cost we are implementing, giving it as an input, as a capex inputs to remove the CO2 from the atmospheres. Then you come to this slide where if a company has multiple sites, on the left hand side you can have multiple sites, say site 1, 2, 3, 4, and say 10 sites, and then you see on a time horizon like 2025 to 2035, for example, say 10 years horizon, you look at all the technologies, and then you say, okay, this technology, which is electric forklift, for example, is NPV positive for all the sites, while some other technologies could be positive, could be yellow means could be we need to further validate it to the extent that we can take a decision, right? So wherever we have green, we are sure we have green, we can put a green and say, okay, we are doing that technology, we are going ahead with the technology. But wherever we have yellow, we want to further validate that technology. And where there is blank, it means that that technology is not applicable to that site. So it's a site-wise matrix with a time horizon and phases to see which technologies can be implementable for us. Now changing the direction, I think this is very important to understand for all of us, and I think most of the people do realize this and have this approach in their decarbonization studies, that we should not we should not target to replace one technology which is carbon intensive to another technology which is carbon neutral or carbon negative as a like to like. For example, if we have a 6 megawatt of boiler in one of our site, for example, then there are phases in which we have to work for decarbonization. The first phase is where we have to look into how we can reduce the footprint first of all, or can we reuse or can we recycle? For example, can we put economizers? Can we put some heat recoveries from the air compressors? Can we put evaporative condensers? So can we reduce the footprint by reusing or recycling or reducing the consumption? Then the second step comes is electrification, which is an easy electrification. For example, a medium temperature heat pump or an electric resisted heating system, which is quite easy and not very heavy electricity intensive. Then the third step is, can we do a technology shift? For example, if we are evaporating something, can we put a multi-stage evaporator? Can we do a technology shift? Can we do a high gravity evaporation kind of things? Big major technology shifts which will further reduce the requirement of the consumptions, so further reducing the footprint. And then lastly, we'll go to the alternative fuels, like we are talking about hydrogen, we are talking about biomass, we are talking about biogas. So can we implement those alternative fuels? So these stages could be parallel with each other, or they could be in series. So it depends which one weighs for which side. And then in the end, we say, okay, we have done everything. Now at the end, we are left with 1.5 megawatt of load, which we need to electrify further with some sort of things like electric boiler or something, which is quite high kilowatt intensive, right? So that's the approach which we generally take. and which we find is a very cost effective in terms of capex investment as well as opex operational costs related. I think I'll stop in this slide and I'll finish off with this slide. This is and don't look at that very busy slide. It's very busy and a lot of words written. But overall, what I want to convey is that if you look at this red hot heat center, which is simple energy storage system in a site, the ideal situation is that we capture all the heat which is going outside from our industry or from our company. For example, flue gases, hot temperatures from pasteurizers, hot temperatures from air compressors, any sort of heat which is going out, we need to capture it, and any sort of cooling which we can do from as a reciprocating system or um, as a system which is opposing to this system, as in heat pumps or something, we need to include that so that we have that very little requirement of very little footprints of generating the steam on the left hand side, and the consumption should be done in a way that we can recover all of that heat and create heat batteries into our system so that we don't need to invest on generating steam at the very first place. So I'll be done with my slides with all these 5-6 slides, but overall the intent is that start working on decarbonization, put a roadmap, put a preliminary study, Gantt chart, take a bind from the high level boards or CEOs or executives, create a decision making tool wherein you can decide against the cost and the CO2 emissions impact so that you can decide on the ROI, NPVs, and then look for a strategy where you can reduce the footprint first and then you can replace it with some other technologies. And lastly, create a heat centers wherein the company is in an ideal state, doesn't really require to generate much of carbon emissions in terms of scope 1.
Excellent.
So that's it from my side, Jared. Open for questions or anything which is.
Thank you so much, Satinder. And yeah, so great to have your angle from preparing these roadmaps and what you've been seeing. Laura does have some internet connection problems, so I'm going to drop in here. Next, speaking to us and presenting us today, we're going to take the angle from more of a single large energy user site. And we've got Geoff, Wang and Gareth Parks here from Sugar Australia. Both have been working diligently on various projects and roadmaps over the last few years. And congratulations for getting the ARENA funding as well for one of the projects. So I think we'll hear a little bit more about that as well. But Gareth, if we could ask you to come off mute and share your screen, take us a bit through your journey, and that way we can get a bit of a flavour, and we'll have the audience be able to cherry pick a little bit from what Satinder's doing, a little bit what Sugar Australia is doing as well, and we'll be able to see what's going to be applicable for different people's sites. Over to you there, Gareth.
Thank you. Thanks, Satinder. We'll be covering some similar ground, except from the perspective of a company implementing the plan itself, but there'll be some similar touch points. My name's Gareth Parks. I'm the National Sustainability Manager at Sugar Australia. I've been in sugar for 18 years across various process engineer and operations type roles. Geoff is the Senior Project Engineer at Sugar Australia, and prior to that he was a process engineer at CSL. I guess first up, so saying we're just going to talk a little bit about who Sugar Australia is, so you get an understanding of our site and I guess our corporation structure. Talk to the benefit of a strategic approach, the plus of having a strong vision, what sort of assessment criteria you need to go through, and I guess through our experience, what the key parts that enabled us to play a successful strategy in this space. Okay, so before I go any further, just to explain our structure, Wilmar International is sort of our umbrella organisation. we're assessed at that level from an NGAS perspective and an emissions perspective. There's Wilmar Australian Holdings, and they own Wilmar Sugar and Renewables, and Mackay Sugar, the combination of which is known as Sugar Australia and the New Zealand Sugar Company. In Australia, we've got 2 refineries and 2 sort of depots, one in Mackay and one in Glebe, with the Melbourne refinery in Yarraville and Mackay refinery in Racecourse. Just as a bit of a background, prior to having a vision, our approach to energy efficiency and reduction in greenhouse gases was pretty episodic. So we would look at our forward forecast. If it looks like there was going to be a jump in energy pricing, then we would quickly do a study, whip up a few projects that we felt would address it to keep our cost structure flat. We would implement those, and then there'd be a pause for a while. So, for example, in 2012, we could see gas prices, which is sort of this line in the back, increasing. We saw that gas prices were forecast to increase, so we put a lot of work into putting in a triple effect evaporator. Once that was in effect and commissioned, we kept our cost structure relatively flat, but then didn't really do a lot in the energy efficiency space for a few years. Where the rubber started hitting the road was, I guess, started in 2017 when the Victorian government passed the Climate Change Act. Then when they announced their clear targets in 2021, and in 2022, Sugar Australia first launched their greenhouse gas targets, and at the end of 2022, Wilmar International committed to SBTI, and that's where we began to develop our roadmap. In 2024, we aligned our targets with the approved SBTI targets for Wilmar. So we changed our vision slightly, but our strategic direction remained the same. So what was the vision? The final vision, once aligned with SBTI, was to reduce our scope 1 and 2 by 42% by 2032 on a 2022 baseline, with a target of net zero by 2050. The benefit of something like this is it was such a long ball strategy that it enabled you to move beyond 1 or 2 projects into a whole network of projects that help support your improvement to plan. And it's a great way to focus your capital planning over a number of years to ensure that you have a steady pipeline of improvement projects. What was the process? It's a bit more condensed in Satinder. It's just a 1-slider. It mirrors some of the same sorts of concepts, which basically is that we gathered all the previous studies we'd done where we hadn't enacted a project, so it was deemed to be, of value but not implemented. We gathered all our subject matter experts, both internal and external. It's very handy to have a mass and energy balance, which we were lucky enough to have for our plant. It's also incredibly important to understand what it is you need to measure, because to really move from where you're at, you need to know where that is. And then you need to know your baseline clearly, so then when you move away from it, you can celebrate your successes. So it's really, and particularly in this day and age where measurement devices are quite cheap, it's a really good idea to identify whatever gaps you have and implement some capital to close those up so you have the appropriate information. For us, we had some sister facilities in New Zealand. They're a little bit further along the path than we were, so we were able to use some of their experience to help inform ours, but also just finding other sites within your corporation's umbrella that have similar challenges can enable you to come across some strategic approaches that are already in play rather than having to develop them all yourself. The last one is similar to Satinder. you want to identify any new and emerging technologies, work out how well they fit to your process, the level of maturity now, and where you think they're going to be in 10 years. In our case, it's really important that we employed an external consultant. They had the ability and the connections to grab all this information and sort it into a cohesive structure with some real assessment criteria, some rigid assessment criteria, out and away from the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day of operations. They also are important because they can identify some of the information gaps where you need to go away and get more information before you can proceed any further. So the next stage is where Geoff comes in and applies his expertise. Geoff?
Yep. So once we've gathered a list of all the initiatives, after consulting our internal process experts, group experts, and external consultants, we put it all together in a big list. And the next step's really developing assessment criteria to rank these initiatives. And that involves really getting together our key stakeholders within the business, operational, maintenance, reliability, process, technical, and of course the GM for the site, to look at what is important to the business. So for Sugar Australia, we've decided that we've arrived at these 4 key criteria: sustainability. Back to the slide, please. Yep, sustainability, complexity, technical risk, and economics. In terms of sustainability, for us, given we're looking to develop a decarbonisation roadmap, so the biggest contributor to that score will be, the carbon reduction potential of the initiative. Complexity, we know that the bigger the project, the more moving parts that initiative will have. So that will then potentially lower the complexity score, as in they won't rank as high, versus a more simple, smaller project which we can easily implement. Then that will be less complex, and hence you'll get a better score. Experience with the technology, so that contributes to technical risk. If it's something that we've done before, just simple pumps and pipes and vessels and heat exchangers, that's a very, very well established technology that that's used industry widely, and also on our Yarraville site. So that will get a good high technical score for technical risk, as in it's low risk. But if it's a technology that's we've never done before, that's quite novel, then that puts that there is a risk that when we do implement this initiative, there could be longer budget implications in terms of fixing things that don't go as expected, or timeline implications that it'll take longer to implement to what we initially intended the initiative to achieve. And lastly, of course, as with all investments, we are expecting some benefits back from the investment as well. So the size of the benefit also impacts the assessment criteria. So what's important to Sugar Australia that contributes to the economic score will be the payback of the project. Next slide. So just the example of what we've done and how we ranked and scored one of our projects, the MVR evaporator. So it's one of the biggest carbon reduction initiatives that we have on site. So that gets a score of 5. In terms of complexity, it is also one of the biggest projects we're looking to do within the last 10 years. So we consider that as quite a complex project. So unfortunately, that scores a little bit lower in terms of hiring and risk. Technical risk in MVRs, it's not something that we've done within the Sugar Australia group, but it has been done within the Wilmar Group, our parent company. I know across the Tasman, New Zealand, they already have an MVR evaporator. So some of the learnings that they have could be shared and used here. So that sort of ranks somewhere in the middle. It gets a score of 3. Economics, initially the payback for this project wasn't too good, but obviously since we were able to obtain the ARENA funding, that brought the payback score, that brought the payback a little bit lower, which puts us sort of again in the middle of the ranks in terms of economics. And you sort of times that all together and you get your initiative score. And then in terms of rating, you can sort of add some more complexity to it, by weighting each of the criteria separately. Some business might see some criteria as more important than others. You can do that, but for the case of simplicity, Sugar Australia just kept them the same weighting. So once we get those scores, again, we get the key business decision makers in the room again and look at it through the lens of our capital planning and our resource planning, because some projects might be very, very good from a decarbonisation perspective, but it might be expensive. So we might need to think about saving up the capital or planning it a little bit down the track, so that we're well prepared, well designed, well engaged to execute the project. Some projects might require a bit more political, customer engagement, our supplier engagement. Might need to consider some government funding and approvals. Again, if that becomes a big factor, then potentially we need to move that down the roadmap. So with all these considerations, with the scores together, we sort of get together and we sort of rank the initiatives across timeline, and then a decarbonisation roadmap is produced. So here is just an indication of what our decarbonisation roadmap looks like. Essentially, just that list of initiatives, the highest ranking ones, and then essentially and put together against the timeline when we're looking to execute them, and our key, obviously, decarbonisation target there as well. So just to show that it is an achievable target and it's something that we can hit by 2032. All right, now that once we established the roadmap, I'll pass over to Gareth to just talk about some of the key learnings and takeaways we need to maintain once a roadmap is established.
All right, thanks, Geoff. All right, so there's really, from our perspective, there's two parts to successful roadmaps. First one is all about the development. So it's about ensuring that the executive suite demonstrates their commitment. It's about developing the right vision and goals, ensuring that you measure everything. And in our case, we were helped because we were already doing NGA's reporting. So we already had a pretty robust carbon accounting and reporting system. And to Geoff's point before, it's about determining the appropriate amount of resourcing. Satinder would have been very happy to see in our roadmap that we had about 3 or 4 projects in a project around making our boilers as efficient as possible, with that view in mind of if we ever do getting around to the point of replacing our gas boilers, that we'll be using them as little as we possibly can, so we can, whatever we replace them with, can be as small as we can get away with from a capital perspective. The second part was an interesting one. There's a lot of fanfare around developing roadmaps and a lot of resourcing put in. The harder part is when you have a roadmap and then it's the ongoing maintenance of it. One of the things where we lost a little bit of momentum was around ensuring that we had clarity around the ownership of the roadmap. Initially, it was shared across a couple of people. It was set up more as a project than an ongoing thing. And we could sort of see our momentum fading a bit through that lack of clarity. And so we acted to reinforce, I guess, the framework we're operating in to get the lines of responsibility really clear. And that's enabled us to pull it back on track. Continued engagement of stakeholders, you can't really say it enough, but if you're worried about holding a meeting, don't just hold it. The more information you pass over to people, the more you get them involved with the decision making, the more support you get and the more visibility you have. And on the topic of visibility, don't just celebrate your wins, just make sure you've got a cadence set up where you're clearly communicating where you're at in relation to your plan. Make sure that everyone is aware that this is an ongoing thing. It's not just a series of big pushes, that it's something that everyone needs to live every day of their operating life. That's it from Geoff and I. Look, we're proud to be part of a company that's had its foundations embedded in the very beginnings of Australia's corporate landscape. And while we tip our hat to the past, we understand our value lies in how we shape the future.
Excellent. Gareth and Geoff, thank you so much. Lots of insights and takeaways there for everybody. And yeah, I can really see how that, I think the key point right there in there, clarity, getting that clarity of the ownership of that roadmap. And you obviously saw that was going off track, but moved it back on. Well done. If people do have questions, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A box, and Gareth and Geoff will start typing away. The next speaker is Michael Simioni. He's the APAC Regional Decarb Leader for GHD. Couldn't help but notice Michael, GHD mentioned earlier on in that presentation there for doing that, one of those original studies. But I'm not sure if you're involved in that one, Michael. But
I was not. I'm sure it was a great study all the same.
For sure, though, you see this. I can see this link back to what we talked about in our webinar last week about setting targets and getting board involvement in there. And I know that's at the level that you often work at is getting that board involvement, understanding that link back to ASRS and what have you. So that's why we thought it'd be great to hear from you about how do we bring all this together and make sure that we're helping people build a business case and get action on these roadmaps. So over to you, Michael.
Yeah, very good. Thanks very much, Jared. And I think it's good to follow two companies that so clearly articulate how they go about decarbonisation. What I'm going to talk about today is some of the mandatory reporting aspects of decarbonisation and also climate change risk, and how organisations should think, coordinate and communicate within themselves to make sure that their mandatory reporting is correct, but also that they are appropriately reporting to the market and stakeholders what they're doing about carbon within their business. Mandatory reporting is, I try to explain it as a bit of a highway code for decarbonisation. I mean, we could all imagine that if all the cars on the road weren't told to drive on the left-hand side of the road, they had no number plates, and people of every age could drive a car, the amount of chaos that would ensue. And so this highway code, mandatory reporting, really sets out clearly to companies how they should coordinate themselves around decarbonisation, so that stakeholders, investors, employees and the public can have a clear view of what those organisations are doing in the carbon space. So mandatory reporting is about disclosing to the market your impact on the climate, so that's emissions and decarbonisation, and the climate's impact on you, and that's climate risk, and how that influences the finances of your organisation. And this is very important because there are services and businesses that will be enhanced through the transition that we are all experiencing, but there are some businesses that are extremely exposed. I won't go into detail regarding that, but investors and stakeholders alike need to have visibility of that. So with regard to disclosure, I think we've listened to the previous two companies regarding some of the mechanics of decarbonisation road mapping, but they would know just as well as I that you need to have the right organisational structures in the background, governance, risk management, metrics and targets in place so that you can actually design and curate those decarbonisation roadmaps. And so disclosure, the mandatory disclosures, there are four distinct pillars around strategy, and Gareth spoke to a little bit of that regarding some of the objectives of their organisation. Governance, so this is who is doing this decarbonisation road mapping, who is signing off on it, who is building the data sets, et cetera, and what are the responsibilities. Risk management, this is all about risk. We've got a lot of technologies that are very nascent in the industry. How are we actually going about understanding the deployment risk of those technologies. And then metrics and targets. I think it's very important. We can all come up with decarbonisation roadmaps and plans, but if there's no implementation of those plans, then we've all got a very big problem. And so mandatory disclosure is going to catch most companies in 3 buckets. Group 1 reporting entities, which have consolidated gross revenue over 500 million, consolidated assets over 1 billion, or more than 500 employees. Any 2 of these criteria will trigger your reporting requirements. And progressively there should be group 1, 2, and 3 there. Progressively, group 1, 2, and 3 will begin reporting over July 2026, July 2027, and also early next year. And so consequently, there's going to be a lot of companies completely disclosing their plans for decarbonisation and climate risk, and we will have great visibility on that. You'll see that there's, in those 3 groups, a lot of companies that will not be necessarily caught in mandatory disclosure, but we're also seeing companies in the supply chain of some of the larger entities that have to mandatorily report being pulled in the wake of mandatory reporting. So a lot of manufacturing, a lot of technology providers, and a lot of supply chain elements are also having to report up their decarbonisation plans to their client customers, the large miners, food and beverage, etc., etc. So, I mean, we all talk about mandatory reporting, and I'm sure the sustainability people in the room know it's just another obligation on their job description to do this mandatory reporting, and may not be able to foresee the benefits of being involved in this. But mandatory reporting actually really does consolidate a business's thinking around climate and climate risk. And so it really helps a business focus and manage risk and resilience within their organisation. The gentleman from Sugar Australia would know very well that through this process of identifying carbon within the business, they're identifying risks to their business should a carbon tax come along. So being able to implement and understand technologies that can abate both the emissions and the risk is beneficial to the business. It builds confidence from investors. All of these projects, all of these companies are financed, and so being able to appropriately allocate capital to businesses where there is great clarity on what they are doing now between now and 2050 is very, very important. And that can also assist with risk adjustment of interest rates, et cetera, depending on the types of companies that those entities are investing in. Obviously, regulatory compliance and global alignment. Mandatory reporting isn't just something the Australian government has conspired to write themselves. It occurs in Europe, it's occurring in Asia, and it has been around in voluntary format in Australia for many, many years now. So we are just getting more aligned with the rest of the globe, and we are in an international finance environment where international investors are also looking at Australian entities. So being able to be aligned with what is happening internationally is very important. Corporate accountability and governance. It embeds climate considerations, and I think, Gareth, you mentioned it in some of your takeaways, embeds climate considerations into corporate thinking. This climate is ultimately something that should be on the enterprise risk register of every company, and management and boards need to be aware of climate risk and decarbonisation as much as management and C-suite staff. One of the interesting ones for me is market efficiency and innovation. Disclosing all your problems or disclosing what you are going to do in the future helps OEMs and technology innovators understand what the market might need. And so that's a benefit. It says here is our problem suite, and go forth and invent solutions that we can implement to help decarbonise our business. Public trust and stakeholder engagement. particularly with employees. I think employees are very shrewd about which companies they want to work for, and knowing that an organisation has no decarbonisation plan may determine whether they would like to work for that organisation or not. And also for various stakeholder groups, a lot of our businesses sit in communities and they're integrated in a network of different community spaces. Being able to build that confidence with those stakeholders is very important as well. And then, of course, benchmarking and performance improvement. We're all going to be reading one another's reports when they finally do come out, and being able to say, look, oh, that's interesting. We might consider that in our next report, or consider that as a solution or an innovation for us. That could come out of the mandatory reporting as well. So when we talk about those pillars, there's the kind of what do we need to do in that space and those pillars. So we've compiled a sort of a list of a curated sort of checklist of things organisations should be doing, aligned with AASB S2, the transition, the mandatory reporting elements, but also those relating to the transition planning task force, which is around orchestrating and telling businesses how to take their decarbonisation plans and translate them into mandatory reporting. So you can see the ambition and action. There's quite a lot of things that need to be done or disclosed. You need to talk about your ambition and your objectives in what you are doing, business model integration, products and services, obviously some aspects of financial planning as well. There needs to be governance. You need to have management oversight. You need to be building decarbonisation plans with the right capabilities and people. You cannot leave this to your January, February, March intern to do and then say, yep, our decarbonisation plan is done. It needs to be much more integrated into your business thinking. Monitoring, reporting, and some of the risk management attitudes to that, and then some of the metrics and targets which we're all aware of. We've talked about and heard about SBTI, science-based target initiatives, or you may choose not to do SBTI and have some other exercise of mapping your targets to a sector carbon intensity or something like that. The important thing here is that we've all got the same hymn book and we're all having to report to the same criteria, which makes visibility and accountability much easier. So most businesses sort of sit back and go, okay, look, I think I'm a tier 2 or a tier 3. I'm going to probably have to report next year. What can I do now to make sure that I'm appropriately skilled and appropriately positioned to be able to do mandatory reporting? And I think there should be some level of confidence that if you have given some consolidated thought to decarbonisation in your business, as we've seen by some of the previous presenters, the journey to mandatory reporting is going to be a much easier one for you. The first thing is to sit back and understand the regulatory requirements of your business. So this is understanding whether you're tier 1, 2, and 3. If you're tier 1 and you don't know it yet, I suggest you very quickly get up the curve. But there are also entities that are in tier 2 and tier 3 that are just making early preparations at the moment for full mandatory reporting. But it's very important to understand the context of your business in the context of your business in the context of mandatory reporting. One of the big vulnerabilities in organisations, and I'm sure the previous presenters would attest to this, is understanding the data that you have to hand, understanding the gaps, and understanding what you need to do to make those gaps or close those gaps. So this could include understanding ESG and climate data, identifying where you have reliable information. You may need to do sub-metering, et cetera, to properly understand the problem space. And you may also find through this process, and this skills gap and building skills within an organisation is also very important. So understanding the gaps and skill sets within your team member. If within your organization you don't have a corporate knowledge of how to do a MAC curve, maybe you want to build that skill set, etc., etc. It's important that, and we mentioned it in the pillars, that you establish governance and assign clear accountability. Like I said, it's not good enough that the intern does this at the start of the year and it's never thought about again. There needs to be process and repetitious process for reassessment. We're talking about technologies that are either maturing very quickly or maybe very slowly. So a carbon action plan, maybe based around a 3, 4, or 5 year review system is very important. You need processes embedded, you need people embedded, and you need sign-off, authorization, authorship, etc., the full racing metric. So once you've got that governance and assigned accountability, you want to be able to integrate this very much into your business planning and thinking as early as you can. I think decarbonisation or climate risk assessments that sit in isolation from other business decision making is fraught with danger, particularly if you're considering, say, a boiler replacement and you haven't talked to your asset management team. They may already have a boiler replacement planned for the facility that you're looking at, and if you don't have any awareness of that, you may miss the boat with being able to, say, convert from gas to electricity, because those asset management plans you just have not considered in your decarbonisation strategies. So including those different asset management, CapEx project build, even acquisitions to a degree, or acquisition strategies is very important to making sure that decarbonisation is integrated into your business. And then the last thing is it's not a spectator sport, and the last thing you want to be doing is pressing print on the 31st of June 2027 and finding grammatical errors or arithmetic errors in your report. Do this and do this repetitiously. We see some of our clients that have been voluntarily reporting to the market are well practiced in writing these reports and have that level of confidence to be able to do mandatory reporting when that due date comes up. And that's also very important because senior management need to build confidence in the process, build confidence in the data sets that underpin some of these decisions, so that they can ultimately sign off on these reports at the end of the day. So there's sort of 5 helpful tips, I would say, that you need to consider when doing your mandatory reporting. I think it's very important that we do decarbonisation, but I think what's more important is that we do decarbonisation well, and that we're avoiding any of the risks associated with greenwashing, and indeed, we're all in it to make sure that carbon is reduced. And being rigorous and making sure you've got these 4 pillars within your business down packed ensures that your decarbonisation plans have a meaningful impact on the environment. So Jared, that's where I'll leave my pastiche of mandatory reporting conversation, but happy to take questions if there are any.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Michael. And Laura, I'm getting updates from Laura that she's still got internet issues, so I'll keep pushing on here. Michael, some excellent insights and quite a checklist and things to work through there. I was wondering if I could ask, say, Gareth and maybe Satinder there. Did you see many similarities in there with how you're working with ASRS and sugar, and in your work, Satinder, and how your roadmaps are feeding into this sort of process? Is that you're seeing that come up often? Because I assume sugar is a tier 1 and is starting this reporting. And Gareth, does this look familiar in how your roadmaps are feeding into these processes?
It does. It's a bit of an interesting one because of how it gets triggered. So it's sort of triggered by Wilmar Holdings, which is sort of an Australian umbrella holdings company. So they're already in that process. So we sort of have a bit of a cascade down association where they're already working sort of 12 months ahead of us on the mandatory reporting and the disclosure element, but they need a lot of the data from us, which is helping pull us up into where we need to be, because we will trigger, Sugar Australia will trigger the tier 2 level, but Wilmar Holdings has already triggered tier 1.
There it is. And Satinder, you can see how your roadmaps are feeding into this ASRS. I'm sure if you're involved with a bit of that sort of reporting as well, this mandatory disclosure reporting.
Yeah, surely. I think what I've seen in the last 10 to 12 months, there is a lot of team structuring happening across reporting for carbon emissions. New positions, new people coming in to do that, and especially some new structures are being prepared. So I think a lot of focus happening on reporting. If someone operates in New Zealand, is I think a bit ahead of curve. They have even asked for a formal report of their of a site's roadmaps of carbon emissions. Like I think Michael did mention it, it should not be an intern making it at the start of the year and then just dusting it off. It's more a live document and a very formal presentation and a very formal submission to the government, wherein you are kind of not audited, but you're questioned at a periodic timelines as well, like how we are progressing on this. So we operate in New Zealand as well. So I think we have been exposed to these kind of systems.
Excellent, thank you. And we do have some questions here. Satinder, you've already answered one of those from Ken about this using international experience, international brewery experience, and maybe just like to quickly run us through that one, the energy efficiency measures you've seen overseas and look to implement them here.
Yeah, I think the question precisely was that, is there any opportunity or initiatives which the other world is doing but we are not doing, specifically towards Europe or other developed markets? And the answer is yes, but yes, for example, a few of the companies and few of our sites in Europe have already installed heat pumps to the best efficiencies they can do. But the answer lies is not that because we don't know this and we are not exposed to that technology. It's not that. It's more precisely because the pricing and the NPVs, because the gas is much cheaper here. The price of electricity versus gas doesn't allow us to get that NPV values, to get that capex done without any justification. So that's what we are working on, how we can make it more beneficial for the business. But yes, I mean, there are opportunities which have been done outside of Australia, but not because we don't know it, but because their manufacturing footprints allow this to happen.
Gotcha. I think a nice, interesting question here from Alex about a CO2 price, and that may well come in when you're building up the roadmaps and setting targets, whether it's an internal price or shadow price, whatever term you may have. Maybe that's one for you, Michael. First, what are you seeing in terms of people setting these internal CO2 prices? You know, any dollars that they're sort of usually using, and how does that feed into the roadmaps and target setting?
A huge amount of inconsistency is my answer to you. And I'll make an example of a multinational miner that we've worked with, where carbon prices aren't universally used across the business. So therefore, capital allocation is really quite difficult from that perspective, because we don't have national carbon prices for every jurisdiction. Internal carbon prices, I would say, or shadow carbon prices are relatively rare. So in some cases, and I would say many cases, projects have to stand on their own 2 feet, sans carbon price. I'd say it's a real deficiency of both the regulator and also companies to not have these instituted internally. I mean, that's a big generalization. There are some companies that do have it, but I'd say it's very, very inconsistently applied.
Yeah, it would seem like it would be a nice, simple way to sort of manage these reductions rather than everything working around it. And
well, yeah. I mean, you regulate for market failure, and I would say that carbon emissions and being able to pollute carbon is a failure, or environmental failure. So you regulate for it, and we don't have that regulation to support, so businesses are having to find unique ways to get around the business case issues for some of these technologies, and that's why we see co-product investment conversations regarding both decarbonisation, but also resilience, reliability, and energy efficiency, using less energy, because once you've got those pillars in the business case, it can stack up better. But decarbonisation on its own sometimes is a struggle.
Tough. And Geoff, in your roadmap, I didn't notice anything explicit saying a carbon price there, but maybe that came in under some economics. What's happening with
yeah? So the economics is we actually looked at ACCU pricing, so carbon credit pricing, but initially in the very first beginning stages of the project. But the catch with that one is if you are selling ACCUs, then the business can't claim the carbon savings as part of its roadmap. So because of that, we sort of lost the interest to monetize the the selling of ACCUs as part of the business. And then so what we did with our projects is we sort of have a separate criteria, like what I've shown, a separate sort of scoring for the carbon reduction, but the economics of the projects need to stand up on its 2 feet, as Michael's saying. So the Arena grant obviously helped us with that, and that really sort of allowed the project to stand. And then sort of the additional ranking, additional sort of scoring from the sustainability aspects of the project adds to that push for the business to put that as a higher priority compared to other similar projects with similar paybacks. Yeah,
that's it. And just finally, then, Satinder, you put a comment in there talking about the capex involved and different capex for different temperature ranges. Just anything further to add on that one?
Yeah, I think as Michael said, the pricing is so variable. I mean, this is a very subjective question to answer, but ballpark, I mean, what we have studied as of now, if you take a $2,000 per ton per year of CO2 amount, capex amount to reduce your CO2, that's a ballpark for a medium to large industry, I believe, where the CO2 emissions are quite high. And the answer also lies and relies on what temperatures you need. Is it 80 degrees or 800 degrees or 1500 degrees? So the prices are going to change hugely basis the requirement of heat temperatures. So yeah, very subjective. But if you want to budget something, take $2,000 if you are a medium setup, medium temperatures, and medium kind of generator of CO2 emissions.
For your capex, thank you. Might just squeeze in one more quick one, and while you're there, Satinder, anything on your vehicle fleet, and then over to Gareth. Anything on reducing in your roadmaps on what to do with the vehicle fleet, or maybe that's all third-party stuff there. Satinder.
Yeah, scope 3, if we are talking about, is entirely dealt by other teams. So, but there is action plan happening on scope 3 as well, a very detailed one.
Yep, of course, for that. And Gareth, any movement on fleet there? Looks like freight EVs. They're coming in fast with the technology.
Yeah, I think it's one of those ones where, because so much of energy is consumed with gas, I think it's less than 5% of our attributable carbon footprints for fleet, and therefore, as part of our scope 3, it's not actually something we seek to define. It's not included in our scope 3 as it's too small.
Gotcha.
So it may be that other companies have a different carbon footprint and there's a greater incentive. We did look a little bit around running electric forklifts once the next lease agreement turns around, but the impact's relatively low. It'd be fairly symbolic rather than moving the needle substantially in the carbon space.
Good to know. Thank you. Look, we are over time, so I might close that off there. Gents, thank you so much for your presentations today and the insights. Much appreciated. Some really good takeaways for everybody on the call today. So thank you once again. I'm just going to share my screen for a little bit of a finish off here. Bear with me, I'll do that. And just to let you know what's coming up there within A2EP, we have 2 more webinars coming up in this Building the Business Case series. That's one, ROI. Game Changers is on next week. It's going to be hosted by Peter Henke and our membership manager, Mark Barber. And then the fourth one in the series is looking at securing finance and looking at green finance, and the likes of CEFC and others are going to be joining us for that one. To finish off the year, though, we have a decarbonising commercial buildings launch, and we're going to have a site tour in Sydney here at a couple of sites that have implemented heat pumps for their space heating, with a bit of a program launch and a workshop to let you know what we're planning for 2026, followed by some networking Christmas drinks. And then already on the horizons, 2026, our first member meeting is going to be in Sydney on the 19th of February, and look forward to getting everyone together on that one for some fantastic presentations and networking once again on the 19th of February. So if you do want more A2EP, as always, grab us on LinkedIn. We're always keeping that updated with the latest important energy and decarbonisation information. Otherwise, thank you so much again to our speakers. Thank you for joining us today, and look forward to seeing you next week for ROI Game Changers. Thank you all.